I've talked with you a lot about fear and the tactic of fear that the enemy uses and the spirit of fear that the enemy represents. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love, power, sound mind, and self-control. And fear is a helpful indicator that we need to return to God. And I've used the example of when you were a child. I feel like this has happened to every single child, where we've been in a store with our parents or some public place with our parents, and we ended up maybe in the next aisle and then realized that we were separated from our parents. We didn't know where they were and we panicked. We felt that feeling of fear, and that feeling of fear helped us to discipline ourselves to pay attention to where our parents are and to stay close to them. A feeling of fear is not a bad thing. It's not bad that God would give us that feeling. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good, and it's scary for a child, but it is a good thing in the end to discipline us so that we understand that every time we feel that feeling, we need to get closer to God. A feeling of fear has been given to you by God. A spirit of fear has not. Well, how do we know the difference? Well, a feeling of fear does not attack us. It does not compel us. It does not jack us up. It is not something that keeps us up at night because we return to God and we use it correctly. A spirit of fear is going to jack us up, and it's going to have all of the symptoms that you know what they are, that we are calling diagnoses, which are not diagnoses, they're consequences. Because when you have a spirit of fear, when you have been handed over to a spirit of fear, it is because you chose that spirit of fear. Well, why in the world would you choose a spirit of fear? When you have a feeling of fear and you do not return to God, you do not use the information that He has given you correctly to return to Him and to go seek Him and sort through and receive His ministry and examine yourself. When you do not use what He has given you correctly, maybe you take things into your own hands, maybe you go set up an idol or use some sort of distraction, which is an idol, in order to soothe your fear, in order to get control of it, etc. You're handed over to the spirit you chose because you have been created and designed for a purpose, and that purpose is to serve God. It is not to serve yourself. That's not even an option. If that is what you choose, what you need to understand is that you've chosen to serve the devil, and that is who you belong to. You have to understand that you were created for a purpose, as a vessel, as a servant, and that at the end of all things, you are going to be marked by the one you have chosen. That mark is going to occur in your heart. It will come out of your right hand and your forehead. Your right hand being your deeds, how you behave and what you speak, all coming from your heart. Well, gosh, didn't Jesus say that? Your forehead, what you think and what you believe. And this causes you to become created in the image of the one you have chosen, of the one who is in your heart. That's the one you're going to emulate, the one you think about, the one you believe in, the one according to whose will or agenda you follow, you behave, you speak. Now, God has used healing synonymously with salvation. If you are not healing, you are not being saved. If you continue to have syndromes, symptoms, diagnoses, it is because you are not healing. It is not God's will for you to continue to have syndromes, symptoms, and diagnoses. It does not serve Him. It is not part of His gospel. Those are consequences. And you have to examine yourself in order to understand why you have those consequences. And so if you have a feeling of fear, then you understand that is part of your design. You go return to God, you receive His ministry, you understand what it is, why it is that you're feeling that feeling, and you sort through what do you need to, how do you need to change your heart? Then you're restored by a spirit of peace. When you return to God, you're restored by a spirit of peace. You should learn to get comfortable with having God's spirit of peace. But you should also understand that you have a responsibility in fanning into flame God's spirit of peace. It's not something that's just going to be bestowed upon you, or that you can scream into existence. Like you're going to scream Satan's spirit out and then God's just going to enter you and you're going to be all good. That's not how it works. If you have a spirit of fear, you need to know that you have been handed over to it. And you haven't been handed over to it by Satan, who's sovereign, because Satan isn't sovereign. You have been handed over to it by God. That's what 1 Samuel 16:14 indicates. The people of the time understood that Saul had been sent a spirit to torment him by God for disobedience. What do you need to do if you've been handed over to a spirit of fear for disobedience? You need to return to God. You need to repent. You need to get into obedience and examine yourself and become changed. And you're not going to be able to do it by the doctrines and gospels of the world. You won't. Because the world does not acknowledge God. The world uses science, which is a field that fundamentally denies his existence, says that there's no creator. And I don't care if a practitioner tells you that they're Christian, because their training is fundamentally based on the premise of science, which claims that there is no creator. And even if people tell you, well, I can be an evolutionist and a Christian, first of all, they're a liar. Second of all, that is not the basis of their training. Let me give you an example. If you were to go to a psychologist and and you had some sort of diagnosis, let's say you had schizophrenia or you had depression. Let's just take something that's a little more common. Let's use depression or anxiety. And the psychologist said to you, this is a spirit. You have a spirit of fear. They could lose their license, first of all, because that is not the gospel that psychology teaches. But it is the truth. That is the truth. There are many people online talking about, oh, they have a whole Christian ministry on their anxiety disorder. Oh, I have this anxiety disorder. This is my suffering. This is my suffering. Really? Like, your suffering is supposed to be for Christ. Your suffering that has been sent to you via a spirit or a curse is because of disobedience. You have no business setting up a ministry to normalize your spirit possession. That is bizarre. And there are so many people who have this. So a psychologist is not going to be able to say that. How about a doctor? If you go to a psychologist is a doctor, different kind of doctor. How about if you go to a medical doctor? You go to a medical doctor, is that medical doctor going to be able to tell you that God has sent you affliction to get your attention and that you need to return to him? Okay, then don't tell me that there are Christian practitioners, because that's not what they're practicing. But that is the covenant that God has made with us. And when Jesus was here, he was casting out spirits for those who looked pretty mentally ill, cutting themselves in a cave, or had neurological disorders, seizures, throwing themselves into fire, or medical disorders, bleeding, giving all they had to doctors to get worse, not better. Jesus was using something foolish to the world, small to the world, in order to confound the wise, in order to foil the wisdom of this world. And what the wisdom of this world says is that there is power in the mind and body. Do you know what the word says? The word defines the mind and body to be the flesh. Paul said you once lived in the passions of your mind and body, in the passions of your flesh. And Jesus said that the flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. How are you going to heal and discipline yourself in a place that is weak, that is incapable of doing that? The only way for you to discipline yourself is to live by God's Spirit and to be cleaned up where he's cleaning you up, which is in your heart. And when you live there, you are going to require your physical flesh to conform and become transformed. When it is written that you are to become transformed by the renewing of your mind, that word for mind is a mind of the heart. What the word is not saying is to become transformed by your carnal mind. It is not saying that. You cannot discipline yourself by the flesh. You've already been told that the flesh is undisciplined, that it requires discipline, that in your covenant, you are required to be circumcised from the sinful flesh, disciplined in your physical flesh, become a new creation, which occurs in the heart, that you have a spirit that's willing to live by the Spirit of God, to do the things of God. Where do you need to live? You cannot make a decision that you're going to behave differently and expect that to create substantial change in your heart because you haven't examined anything. You have to heal from the inside out. You have to become a changed creation. You have to bear the fruit of repentance, which is change. And that change is not just behavioral. And it's not just what you're putting out there, because I'm going to tell you right now, and you should probably know this from your own personal experience, that you can change a behavior and still be the same jerk inside. You can change the way you're speaking to people and still have the same feelings of hostility and hatred and passive aggression, but then say, but my words were appropriate. And the other person can feel scared because they know your words are appropriate, but what's inside of you is not right. And you know darn well that there are certain things that you can make a decision that you want to change this thing. It is ruining your life. It is something maybe even that your parents did to you that now you're doing to your children or to your employees or to your spouse. And you just feel so mortified over it and so heartbroken that you keep continuing this behavior and you just can't change it because you're not changing. Because changing your behavior doesn't mean that you have changed. And you will inevitably go back to that behavior, if not worse. There are two main things that the world lacks in regards to healing. Two main understandings. The first is that the Lord is our healer, that Christ is our healer, and he told us that in Exodus 15:26. So if you don't have Christ, you will never have healing. I don't care how many years of therapy you do. And I am proof of that because I did many years of therapy, even being a therapist. The second thing is that you have been designed in a particular way, and the world does not acknowledge that design. You have been designed by your Creator to learn what he intends for you to learn so that you can be built and eventually used in his kingdom. And so if you're not learning from the things that he's sent, and rather you have this other kind of understanding about the things that you've experienced in your life as being trauma and now suddenly having damaged you so that other people need to take care of you, or you need a diagnosis to excuse yourself, or you need like all of these, distractions, anything but actually examining yourself and what that has caused in you, how you need to learn from it, how you need to change, what God has intended, how he's intending to build you. If you are not in understanding, like if you don't understand that you are being made into something, you're going to think about your suffering in a very different way, and you're not going to approach it correctly. You're not going to go back to God and say, you're sovereign over everything. Why have you sent this in my life? You're not going to examine the way that you feel and approach it in such a way that you're trying to gain understanding of what God is doing. You're going to think that you're a victim. But then what are you a victim of? You're not a victim because God is sovereign and he will vindicate you and he will teach you. And these are the things that he has sent in your life in order to build you into a tool that can be used for special purposes. Attempting to heal by the so-called power of the mind and body does not lead to substantial change. It leads to superficial change that can only be viewed for a short period of time because you'll go right back to it. You'll get triggered and you'll spiral. This is a trick of the devil through the evil field of psychology. You have to be changed in your heart. You have to learn the lesson, and then God will relent. And I want to tell you something, and in fact, I will promise you something, that if you change by God, if you do the work that I have outlined in Heart Known series, which I offer to you for free, this is not some pitch to make money off of you. If you do that work that is biblical work based on the Bible and based on my testimony, and you return to God, you will not have symptoms, because there will be no reason for God to continue to provide you consequences for not returning to him and not learning from the things he has sent in your life. Now, I've spoken with you about this feeling of fear, and this feeling of fear that God uses to discipline you. When you feel fear, you return to God, you learn whatever it is in that particular situation that you need to learn, that it will leave you. It will have done its job. That information will have done its job. If you have a spirit of fear, that's different, because you're being jacked up and compelled, and you need to recognize the difference between a feeling of fear and a spirit of fear. If you have a spirit of fear, you're going to have to figure out why you were handed over to it. You're going to have to go receive God's ministry and do some deep work. There is another indicator that I want to be on your radar, that I want you to consider. And that is when you start to live in an undisciplined way. When you start to live sloppily, you are straying from God. God is not a spirit of chaos. He's not a spirit of messiness. He is a spirit of sound mind and self-control and discipline. For many years, I lived in such a way that externally you might think I was very disciplined. I was very wealthy. I had 3 businesses. I was very organized as far as those businesses were concerned. Every environment I was in, whether it was in my garden, my house, my offices, everything was in its place. Everything was immaculate. And you might say from the outside that I was very disciplined, that you would never describe me as being sloppy, but internally I was sloppy. Now, you might have different indicators. There may be external sloppiness that you end up having. You have to figure out what this looks like for you. For me, my emotions were all over the place. For me, I was over drinking at times, deprived of food at some times, overeating at other times. That's sloppy, that's messy, it's undisciplined, it's inconsistent. It is an indication that internally I lacked self-control and sound mind. You're going to know by God's peace whether you have self-control and sound mind. If you are all over the place, if you cannot hold on to yourself, your sense of self, your emotions, your thoughts, your beliefs, the word deals with this. The word talks about it. It talks about people like that being unstable, swayed by the wind, like a wave tossed by the wind, double-minded. You're not going to be able to stand if you are unable to hold on to what you believe, what you think, know what to do with your feelings, how to examine them, how to bring them to God, how to use them as information in the design that God has given you in order to relate with him. That's a paradigm right there, isn't it? If you lack that self-control and sound mind, it is an indication that you are not fanning into flame God's Holy Spirit, and you are occupied by a different spirit. You are not going to be occupied by a spirit that is jacking you up and tossing you around at the same time as you're occupied by God's spirit of sound mind and self-control, because they are at odds with one another. And so your fruit is going to tell you what you're occupied by at a given moment and what you need to do if you discover that you are bearing the fruit of being occupied by a different spirit. You need a way of examining yourself. You need to return to God, and you need to do it deeply, because he will not return to you if you're double-minded or if you're just throwing him a bone. He knows better. He knows your heart. You need to remove all your idols, and you need to start addressing where you're messy, where you're sloppy. And this is going to require you to have some sort of a gauge of personal examination, personal accountability, of having a grip on your tongue. There is a person on this channel who I engaged with quite a bit, providing my offering, and I have refused to speak with this woman anymore because she has no self-control. She flips off and starts making accusations and projections, calling me Hitler. That is not a spirit of self-control and sound mind, and I refuse to have conversations with a person who conducts themselves that way and does not hold themselves accountable. That is not a person who's going to be able to hear correction. And the thing is, there is a gauge by which God's servants will eventually say no more abuse. Like, we'll take a little bit of it while we're bearing you, but at a certain point, no more. And you might think that that's mean. Oh no, you need to bear them all the way to the end. No, I don't. And I'm going to tell you why. Because God holds us accountable, and he teaches his servants how to hold others accountable. And if you are not bearing the fruit of changing, then that is on you. You have chosen not to change. I have provided the videos, the books for free, the emails, the phone calls, the text message, all of that. I have provided for free to you guys. I have held nothing back that has been freely given to me by God. There is no excuse for that. There is no excuse to not know what y'all need to do. Even now, I continue to speak a message that I've already spoken, and when God brings this to me, I'm like, haven't I already spoken this message? It doesn't matter. As many times as he tells me to speak it, go speak it, and speak it in this way so that they can get it from that perspective, because he is giving you every single opportunity to be able to return to him, to be able to be healed, to accept what he has provided through his witnesses, so that when it comes time for those people who have rejected it, they will have no excuse. Another topic that I want to cover with you guys is something that someone brought up to me the other day, and that is, does my sin and does my healing affect my adult children? We know that God's word tells us that he curses to the third and fourth generation of those who hate him. We know that he says that the sins of the parents do affect the children. They most definitely affect the children. But there is this woo-woo, crazy, nutty idea in counterfeit Christianity that there's something in your blood. There's a blood. They take bloodline. They take this word and they're like, oh, there's something in the blood. Cleanse my blood. And then they do all these ritualistic, satanic things to cleanse their blood. Making, really what they're doing is like making God out to be some idiot. Your blood's not infected. Your bloodline is your lineage. Hello? Why is that so difficult? Because people are not having a substantial, genuine, authentic relationship with God. They make everything about ritual and about superficial nonsense. Do we not know that the things that one generation does is going to affect the next generation and the next generation and the next generation? Do we not understand that? Of course we do. We understand that on a practical level, that if you're not living right, it's going to affect your kids. Your kids are going to learn how to not live right. Then they're going to teach their kids how to not live right. But there is something deeper that we need to understand. It's not just about learned behaviors, though that is part of it. There is another part of this that has to do with God's law and his covenant that he made with his people. If you obey me, I'm going to bless you, but if you disobey me, I'm going to curse you. Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, in case you want to reference it. So that we need to understand that not only that we don't just go through this life like, getting away with certain things, or there's some sort of formula to if I do XYZ, then I'll get ABC. There's actually something that exists in our lives called accountability. And the one who holds us accountable is God. And what he's holding us accountable to is the righteousness that he outlined in his law, in his covenant. That we need to live in a certain way. That we need to be circumcised from the sinful flesh, disciplined in the physical flesh, changing in the heart, willing to do the things of God by living in the spirit he gave us according to his spirit. These are the things that he has said. And so if that's the way that we're living, we're not going to have the problems that we have right now, such as addictions and incest and physical abuse and emotional abuse that are being passed down from generation to generation. If we've actually been living this out, we're going to be able to regulate our emotions. We're going to fan into flame God's Holy Spirit. We're going to have a spirit of self-control, sound mind, love, power. And if we're not, we're going to be handed over to a spirit that hates us, that wants to destroy us, a spirit of fear. We're going to be handed over for the destruction of the flesh that we might be saved. So we're going to experience a lot of consequences, and our children are going to experience those consequences with us. Now, there is something that a lot of you don't want to accept. And this is that when you stray from God and you refuse to live according to the ways that he requires you to live, he is going to send you affliction, whether it's emotional, physical, neurological, whatever you want to call it. He's going to send you affliction. And that affliction is going to manifest the spiritual condition that's going on inside of you. He spoke to you in parable when he was here. Why wouldn't he speak to you in parable now? He's going to speak to you in a metaphor of what is being manifest from your spiritual condition into your emotional condition, into your physical condition. And he will do this to your children too. And he has so stated it. So if you don't like it, it doesn't really matter to me, because the bottom line is that you either accept the truth or you don't. But your behavior does affect your children. No, it is not traveling in your blood. It's coming from your heart. And those consequences are being sent by God. And it is unacceptable as a parent to not acknowledge and do something about that. So that if your children are sick, you need to go examine yourself. If you are sick, you need to go examine yourself. And there's no cap on this. It's not like, oh, well, they're 18 now, so on their own. Look, God has established development, and that in development, you become more and more personally accountable for your behaviors. So while it is true that an adult child is able to turn away from the wickedness of their parent and serve God, it is also true that the parent should be being used. They should be being used to heal themselves so that their children can also be healed, so that blessing can reach their children, so that they can be used to share a testimony with their children. And that the continued sin of the parent can affect adult children. And again, I want to tell you that naturally your behavior, if your behavior is changing and your conversations are changing and you are sharing testimony with your children, not lording it over them, but sharing your testimony with them, and you're praying for them and you're fasting on their behalf, that those things are going to affect your children. But there is also something else that will affect your children that I can't claim to understand at all. But I will tell you my testimony about it. When I started healing, when I started changing, and I started addressing my behaviors and the things that have affected my daughter in my own behavior, in my own sin, whether ignorantly or knowingly, and most of what I did was in ignorance, in spite of anything that I was directly doing with my daughter, because she was living in college already. She wasn't even in the same house. God was already beginning to move her. He was already beginning to convict her and move her into place so that she could be healed. And I don't claim to understand that at all, except that that is the gift, that is the faithfulness of God. And that in spite of whatever you've done with your children, however you mess this up and however irreparable you think it is, maybe you're separated from your children right now, that God can, and I believe he will, move in your children's life if you do the work that you need to do. That is my testimony. And at some point, if you are genuinely doing this, if you are genuinely healing, he's going to use you. And though you may have been used by the devil for all kinds of things that you shouldn't have been doing, that you maybe even thought were good, he will use you for good. Now he will use you to bring in your children, to save them, to walk in the authority that you were supposed to walk in, that you couldn't have possibly understood without him. God has moved us into our respective roles in my family, in spite of us. Like none of us, I was this go-getter, boss lady, oldest sibling, always in control of everything. He has put me in a place where I am not in control of anything. But I am a grandma, here to help my kids, here to grow them spiritually, to be present and to influence my grandchildren. That's what he has me in. I was busy lady all day, compelled in this direction and that. Y'all talk about type A in the world. I was like type AAA. But it was not my personality. It was the personality of the enemy that was jacking me up and making me think that I had to stay busy in order to be in order to be anything, caused me to miss out on being present, on having a relationship. And so God has slowed me down to a complete halt so that I will live in the way that I was always supposed to live. And he has caused me to be comfortable in that. And he has disciplined me into this role so that if I start in any way, shape, or form start trying to take control by the work of my hands again, he smacks me down. He afflicts me. It's such a blessing, actually. It's a blessing that I get to feed, here on the channel, that I get to feed my children. I get to feed my grandchildren and actually be used for the role that he has always intended me to have. Same thing with my daughter. She went, there's that whole apple and tree thing. She was getting her doctorate. She was ready to become a professional and all these other things. And God said, you're going to stay home with your children because that's the role I gave you. The woman is bearing children and the man is working the land. And that's what she does. And she does it so well. She is so present and so tender and beautiful with her children. And her husband is out there working the quote unquote land. But he's working it the way that God designed him to work it. Not according to him going and getting a job from the world so that they're dictating things, so that they are taking insurance. No, he's working this the way that God has taught him to share his testimony about what healing actually is and where it comes from. And not only that, but if he was working the land, he would be able to come into the house and have lunch with the family and be available to the family, to whatever was needed. And him being self-employed and able to work in the way that God has set him apart to work, that's exactly what he's able to do. He makes his own schedule and he's able to come back here and put the baby down for naps and to be a presence in the home so that the children actually know their father. It's disgusting that this has become acceptable, that children don't know their father. And now that they don't know either one of their parents. When you heal, he's going to move you to walk in the authority he has given you. And it may be uncomfortable because this isn't what you thought you were going to be. But he has a way of molding you into that too. You can either we can do it the hard way or the easy way. Usually it's the hard way because we're like unruly calves. Once you have walked in the trusts he has given you correctly, I want you to know that he is going to continue to work on you as an individual. You'll continue to heal as an individual. You'll continue to be taught how to walk in those trusts correctly. But once you have proven yourself to him, that you will accept his molding, his creating of you into a tool that can be used for special purposes, when you have proven worthy of the trust you've been given, you'll receive more. And that is what the kingdom of heaven is all about, isn't it? That's what Jesus described. When you have proven worthy of a trust, you will receive more trust. Then you can start serving in his house. Then he will testify and bring you into his house as a priest. And you'll be given gifts in order to do what he has been building in you for him. Not to babble in the air, not to be important. I don't know when being a prophet became important. That's crazy. The people in the Bible, really, like there were false prophets. The only ones who have ever been important, the only ones who people were going to and asking, oh, tell us, were the false prophets. Jesus already told you that. Woe to you when people speak well of you, for in the same way they treated the false prophets before you. But blessed are you when you're slandered and cursed on account of my name. That's how they treated the real prophets. When did a prophet become important and well liked by the world? So you have to understand the sufferings of Christ that you're going to participate in when you are deemed worthy to serve in his house. And that you're not going to receive all of the trusts of serving in his house. You're going to receive a trust. And then when you do well with that, you'll receive more. And when you do well with that, you'll receive more. And that's why Paul told you, desire the greater gifts. He didn't tell you that in vain. Desire the greater gifts, because when you've done well with what you've been given, which at that point, the lower level gift was tongues, so that you could go and share the gospel as a Jew who spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. You could go and share in different languages to the Gentiles. Not so you could go babble in some counterfeit church like a lunatic and act like you're serving God. That isn't even serving you. You don't even know what you're saying when you're doing that. When you have done well with what he has already given you in this life, you're not paying child support. You're not taking care of those kids. You're not calling them. It's not an excuse that you're separated from them. You call them every day. You be a part of their life. You mentor them like you've been taught in the word, like you saw Solomon do with his son. Son, this is what I want to teach you today. Do well with the trust that you've been given, and then you'll be given more. But there are far too many people claiming to serve God when their own houses are not in order, and God is not testifying to that. And he is afflicting those people. And I counseled them when I was practicing psychology. And the three main things that were going on with them were heart issues, obesity, and porn addiction. This is a problem when people claiming to serve God, this is the prevalence of defilement that is occurring in people claiming to be pastors and priests and bishops. And I don't need to tell you that. You can look at what the harlot Catholic Church produces. You can look at what the prostitutes that bore out of her, the Protestants that think they're better than her, don't even realize they're her children. You can see the fruit of what they're bearing. I don't need to tell you that there is filth, sexual immorality going on there. I don't need to tell you that there's overindulgence. I don't need to tell you that there's a heart issue, do I? You can see it. God is not testifying to that Antichrist. Make sure that you're healing. Make sure that it is genuine, and make sure that you are being moved by God to do what you claim to be doing in his name. If you are on this channel and you think that you are an influencer, you think that you are a servant of God, I have news for you. You are a liar. Because I know that at this point in history, the only people who are doing this are the witnesses of God. And either you know that you are a witness, and I don't know what you'd be doing on my channel. You should be out there doing what he raised you to do. I'm not going on other people's channels to find out to hear the word of the Lord. This is a message of correction. It is a message of discipleship. I will trudge with you. I will teach you. I will share my testimony with you. That's what I'm doing here. And that's what all the witnesses are doing. There is no one else other than the witnesses who are doing that right now. You need to know that. You need to discern it. Go read it in scripture. You need to know that, because the multitude in white robes will not be doing this until the witnesses are gone. So if you're doing that already, I sincerely hope that you will go return to God and repent for whatever is messed up in your heart, that you set yourself up that way. And for the rest of you, go clean up your social media, go clean up your YouTube channels, separate from me, separate from everybody that you're listening to, and go ask God, who's speaking the truth right now at this point in history? Go ask him. If you actually believe in him, you will do the things that I'm telling you right now. Separate from everyone. If you have not discerned what I'm telling you right now about what I'm doing, separate from everyone and go ask him, and believe that he will give you the answer. And don't return to any of it until he gives you the answer. Ask him who's speaking the truth right now. I know that he will testify to what I'm doing. I know that he will tell you exactly what I'm telling you right now, which is no one is speaking the truth except for his witnesses. Go discern that with God.